Welcome to this Recovery from Relapse meeting. Today is Tuesday, the 9th of May, 2023, and today we are privileged to have Kathleen with us. Kathleen came into OA in 2010 and resides in Chicago. So, Kathleen, we look forward to hearing your story.
I am so happy to see you all. I am brought to tears. So I'm going to just say a little prayer. Lord, just lead me, guide me, give me the words from my heart. Let your spirit of truth speak true through me, God, to help others. Bless this time we have together, this wonderful fellowship. Thank you, praise you for your goodness and your love for us, your deep affection for us. Thank you. Amen. Oh boy, I was just going to ask if this meeting, where does this meeting originate from? Seems like there's a lot of Irish people. Does it come from Ireland? I mean, it's
fully global.
Pardon me?
It's fully global.
Fully global. Okay, interesting. I have Irish ancestry as well. My grandparents came from Ireland. And so I have a special love for the Irish people. So I'm just delighted to see so many of them on this meeting, and others as well. I can see there's some from the U.S. too. So, oh my heavens, where do I begin? I was terrified and have been terrified to speak at this meeting. It's just something that terrifies the living daylights out of me. And I had thoughts from time to time, I need to call and say, I cannot do this. I cannot speak at this meeting. But I feel my higher power was saying, don't do that. Just do it. Be afraid and do it. And so that's what I'm doing. And, but when I'm now in your presence, I am so grateful for this fellowship. So I'll start with, how did it all begin? Well, let me see now. I started actually in probably the late 1980s, going to ACOA. I am an adult child. I'm an alcoholic, and lots of alcoholics in my family. In fact, I have my family of origin. There were 6 children. We're a fine Irish Catholic family. And we, all of us had addiction problems, every one of us. My father was an alcoholic. My mother was a codependent enabler to some degree. So that was my background. In the late 1980s, I started going to ACOA. I went for a little bit. I wasn't committed, but I did learn some things about why I was the way I was. Finally, in 1995 or 94, I became a member of AA. I had an alcoholic problem, and I did become a member of AA. At that time, my mind started to get clear about some things. And about a year into my recovery in AA, I began to wonder about some of my eating habits. And they had never been strange to me before, but with the clarity of mind that I've got from without the alcohol and you know, getting closer to God, I began to say, you know, something is wrong with my eating. I was a thin person, but I exercised a lot. I know one time I was talking to my AA sponsor, and you know, I said to her, I think I have some kind of eating problem. You know, I eat weird, and I do weird things, and get on weird diets and stuff. And she said, well, I had told her I eat ice cream for dinner. And she said, well, eating ice cream for dinner might be an indication you have a problem. And so I thought, oh, well, you know, maybe she's right about that. And there was an OA woman in our AA fellowship. And I talked to her and I just said, I think I have a problem with eating. And she said, oh, just go to OA. Um, and here's a number for with my sponsor. Call my sponsor. And so because I was in the place where I was listening to what people said and told me to do, I actually did that. I went to an OA meeting. I called her sponsor. And that was like in 1995, 96, something like that. And in those, I went for a short time to OA, maybe 2 years. And in that time, I did find out some things about my eating disorder. Um, and I gained some knowledge about it. And I stopped eating sugar and I stopped eating white flour and I lost 20 pounds. I was happy about that, but that wasn't the main thing. However, and I talked, I had a sponsor and I talked with her, but she didn't bring me through the steps at that time. Um, and really, I know I got something, like for instance, I learned that we have in America, we have these places, in the grocery stores where they have bulk food. And I would take the bulk food and put it in a bag, bulk candy. And I put it in the bag and I'd eat the whole bag going through the grocery store. And I thought that was perfectly fine. And then I'd go back and fill the bag so I could bring some home. And I learned in my OA meetings, and it came to my mind that that was stealing. I had never thought of that as being stealing. And so my conscience started to get clear. Um, and then I remembered the very first thing I ever stole in my entire life was um, a Heath bar, which is it's chocolate toffee bar. That's the first thing I ever stole in my whole life. And when I stole again, it was several years later. And I opened up a bag of Oreo cookies at a grocery store, and I ate them. I ate a lot of them, and left the bag there. I didn't eat the whole bag, but I was met at the door by the grocery manager saying, "Are you going to pay for this?" And that I was a teenager when I did the my first thievery. I was probably about 10 years old, and I was a teenager. So there I was with that, and I became aware of, oh yeah, that was the first thing I stole. So it must be a problem. Anyhow, I continued in AA. I became a very active member in AA, but I stopped going to OA because I had to go to Families Anonymous in treatment with one of my sons for drug addiction, and there were just so many meetings I could go to at the time. And so I chose to go to Families Anonymous, and I did not return to OA until 2010. So I had lost this weight in the 90s. By 2010, I had gained it all back, and then now I was 169 pounds and gaining very, very quickly. And in those years from the 90s to 2010, my disease had progressed. And I found, when I was younger, I was able to control my eating with these weird diets and exercise. I always thought that I was fatter than I was. And my sister would say, you are very thin. And and I was reading books about how to get thinner. And, but in those years, 169 pounds, 2010, and I could not, I did not like OA. I thought it was it was not as much fun as AA. People seemed to be more serious. I had a hard time in the fellowship, and I was judging people, but I still came because I felt that God was directing me in 2010 to go to OA. I don't usually make New Year's resolutions, but in 2010, I saw I was losing control of the food. I was not able to control my weight anymore. And I made a resolution. I would go back to OA and find a sponsor. And that is what I did. But I knew that God wanted me to go. That was the direction he was sending me. And I didn't want to, but I did. And I did not feel good in the meetings. I felt like I wasn't getting it. I asked one of the OA members one day, well, what is your food plan? What is your food plan? And she said, well, you still don't get it, do you? You're still trying to control the food. And I thought, well, duh. Yeah. I mean, isn't that the point? You have to control the food.
That's 10
And
minutes.
thank you. And so, thank you so much. And so I was thinking, oh, I'm not getting it. I'm not getting it. But I continued to go. I continued to work with a sponsor. I got my old sponsor back from years ago. She worked with me on a lot of issues. My body, hatred of my body that I had, loathing my body, not wanting to look in the mirror at myself. I had a lot of emotional issues still, although I had a lot of recovery in AA, a lot of spiritual recovery, a lot of emotional recovery. I was still fighting food. I was still fighting others from time to time. Um, there was still emotional and spiritual growth that I needed. And she was helping me with that, learning how to accept where I was, um, learning to accept the weight I was, she taught me to look at what God had done in my life and not at at my faults and what I failed at. And so she was teaching me to come out of that place of negativity all around my body, uh, my body image. And so I learned a lot from her. She was wonderful. Um, but I did say to myself and to others, I am not going to say my big addiction is sugar. That is my main addiction. And I could not say, well, to begin with, I'm going to abstain from sugar, because I knew that sugar always wins. I've tried so many times in my life to abstain from that, and it always came back. It always won, and I thought, I'm not going there. And I also was not going to start calling in my food and things like that, because I saw people who first came into OA. I saw they did not stay long, because they started to call in their food and try to follow a food plan that they were unable to follow, and then they would be overcome by shame. And I didn't see them again in the meeting, and I thought, I'm just not going there. And but I still worked with my sponsor, and that wasn't one of her requirements for me calling the food. The requirements was to learn how to accept where it was at, to learn not to quit fighting the food. But by 2015, by some miracle, and it had to be a miracle, I found abstinence from sugar. I was on my way to a day where I was going to have to go to 2 birthday parties and face 2 cakes, and that was one of my huge weaknesses, and all the stuff that goes with birthday parties. And I had recovered enough to this point in 2015, from 2010 to 2015, that I could talk about the food, and I could talk about what I was struggling with. And so I called a man that was in our fellowship, and I think he was sponsoring me with, I finally agreed to send in my food by 2015. And I was working with 2 sponsors, my original one, and then this man who I called the food into. And I called him up on my way to these birthday parties in the morning, and I said, I need to help. I don't want to eat these cakes. And he said, okay, is your life unmanageable? Does the sugar make your life unmanageable? Yes. Do you believe that a higher power can restore your sanity? Yes. Have you decided to give your will and your life over to the care of God? I said, yes. He said, okay. If you go, and if you have any problems during the day, give me a call. And just those questions, it was a short conversation. I did not eat the cake. I did not eat the candies. They were calling me, but I was able to not eat them. That was huge. And that was in December sometime, around Christmas time. And I continued to not have to eat the sugar. even through Christmas, I didn't get into the sugar, which is a huge sugar holiday for me. All the holidays were sugar holidays for me. But by I think it was December 23rd, no, 28th, I was so exhausted from eating, not eating, but I was so exhausted from the whole Christmas thing. I was very tired, and I was sitting with sitting in the room that I was in. There was this toffee that I would eat like a pound at a time. And I thought I wanted some of that toffee, and I took a bite of it, and I thought, I don't even want this. And then I thought about, oh my God, I haven't eaten any sugar in maybe weeks. I didn't even notice how long it was. And now eating this toffee would be like slapping God in the face, because God had given me the grace, just unexpected grace, to not have to get into the sugar for that holiday. But the big, huge trigger was tiredness. But I was able to say, God help me. And I put that down, and I got a connection with God. I thought, oh my God, God is doing this in my life. And I'm not going to insult him by taking this. And then began my recovery from what I call recreational sugar. And I had that for till 2020. And I continue that to today. But up to 2015 to 2020, I remained in AA. I sponsored people, OA, I mean. I sponsored people. I had neutrality from the sugar, from the cakes and the candies and those things that were really huge, huge addictive triggers for me. But I really didn't look at ingredients and things like that. I didn't even know about doing that. And in 2020, when the coronavirus was upon us, I began to listen to Vision for You. The reason I had is because one of our fellows in the OA meeting before the virus, the face-to-face meetings that I went to, for 5 years, we were going to these meetings together, and she was overweight. She stayed the same weight the whole time. And she was always struggling. And I met her. I hadn't seen her for a while. I met her in a meeting, and I saw her weight had changed, had gone down. She was confident. She was bright. She was excited. And she said, she started listening to Vision for You. She was going to this meeting. And so I thought maybe I'll go, because all that I felt even with the abstinence from the sugar, I still felt like I wasn't like everyone else. I wasn't abstinent enough. I wasn't getting something. I felt guilty and shame sitting there because I was still struggling with certain foods. So during the virus time, I started listening to Vision for You in like March, and I did not take part in the meeting. I just listened to it. And by August, they were reading about Bill. They'd come to reading about Bill being in Winchester Cathedral, and this doggerel about the guy dying from drink was an ominous warning to him. And during this time that I was listening to Vision, I was struggling with other foods, with eating pizza. I was seeing a nutritionist. I couldn't stop eating pizza. I couldn't eat pizza according to my plan. I was struggling with popcorn, all these different foods. And I just felt shame all the time. Every time I'd come to a meeting, and for all the years that I went, I just felt shame, like I wasn't getting it. I wasn't absent enough. But I still sat in chairs. I still had growth, spiritual growth, emotional growth too, but always sitting with this shame. And finally, when they said an ominous warning, I knew I was isolating. Even going to these meetings, I was not taking part in them. I did not want to sponsor people anymore. I was tired of that. And so the ominous warning was that I was in relapse, and that I needed to introduce myself in this meeting, and I was terrified to do it as a newcomer. But because God really did speak to my heart, the ominous warning is all of these feelings you've had, the shame, the not wanting to sponsor, the wanting to isolate. It's an ominous warning. Introduce yourself. I did. After I did that, I told the truth about where I was at. I was just floundering in my program. I was still abstinent from recreational sugar, though. I never did break that abstinence by God's grace. I never did. But I knew there was something I needed to go deeper. I needed to go further. I did not want to do the work. That was the problem.
That's 20 minutes.
And so I called, I did that introduction. And right after that, somebody called me to welcome me. And I shared with her the struggles I was having with specific foods. I struggled with leaning out of the fellowship. I had trouble with leaning in. And so we had kind of a brief conversation, but about the pizza, she said to me, she said, of course. I said, what would I do without pizza? My family gets together and we eat this pizza together, and it's like fun and it's a wonderful thing. And she said, well, of course you don't want to stop eating that, because that's how you make connection. That's how you connect. And I thought, oh my God, I thought it was because I was bad. And I saw it wasn't that. It was because I wanted to connect to people. And that's how I use the food in a lot of cases in my life. And seeing that and understanding that right at that moment when she said that, I realized that my mind was opening. I became willing at that moment to do things I would not ordinarily do, which was to make a red list and a green list and a yellow list. I was never willing to do that. And she suggested that, and I was willing to do what she suggested. And then I realized, about the pizza. It like came to my mind when I was very young. My mother was home on Saturday. She worked in the evening for the telephone company, and we were left with my drunk father. But on Saturday she'd be off many Saturdays, and we'd have pizza, and the house was full of sunshine because my mom was there, and pizza, and the fun of eating it and being together and watching TV. I felt a connection, and now I was able to connect the dots and realized it was connected to not because I was bad. It was connected to this other thing. And so I had said this prayer, the set aside prayer. The vision did teach me the set aside prayer. Help me to set aside everything I think I know about this disease, about the 12 steps, about you, God, about me, so that I can have an open mind and new experience. I prayed that prayer for all those months in 2020, from March to August. And in August, after this woman spoke to me, I was beginning to have a new experience. My mind began to become open to doing these things I was not willing to do up till then. Right after that, I hung up the phone with that woman. Another woman called me from the vision to welcome me. And it was very fast thing. And I spoke a little to her about my experience. And she said, do you have a sponsor? I said, no. And she said, well, get one and don't sit on it. And I took her advice. A week later, I called the first woman and I said, would you sponsor me? And she said, yes. And I was willing to make the red list, the yellow list, and the green list. And I was on a plan at that time, because in 2015, I did go to a nutritionist and got on a plan that I could never really follow completely. I had lost weight all of these years coming to OA, like from 2010 into 2015, I'd gone from 169 pounds to like 159 pounds. I lost 10 pounds. So I was losing the weight, but now I was actually able to stay on this plan. And, but when I got serious about the food, my sponsor had me looking at ingredients and stuff, and I realized I was eating things with sugar in it, like sweet pickles. I was eating sweet pickles. I didn't even think that they had sugar in it. So she said, I want you to get squeaky clean and look at ingredients. And I hated doing that. It was taking time. have to go to the store, look at ingredients. It was such a pain in the ass, and I was mad about having to do it. But I did started doing that, and it forced me to have to start to find new ways to eat. It forced me just looking at the ingredients. I thought, I can't eat this, so what can I eat? And I started losing weight really kind of quickly from 2000. From September to maybe January, I had gone from 149 pounds to about 130 pounds. I am now 117, 118 pounds, and that weight has been maintained for over 2 years now, without really very little effort. I have to look at my plan and things like that, but and deal with that, and work on that. But by God's grace, I've been maintaining a normal body weight, which I cannot hardly believe. But at any rate, the thing that got triggered, though, when I started cleaning up my food, the food just got cleaner, and I started getting clearer. But the thing that was really triggered was this deep, deep shame. The shame came up in me. I had terrible fear that I wasn't going to be able to stay abstinent. I had to talk to my sponsor every day about that. I was still full of fear and shame. And I find that, I believe that in the big book, they say fear is one of the worst things that we can have as addicts. And I think world round that would apply. But I would add to that shame, fear and shame. And I think that they're brothers and sisters. And so that is the thing that God started to deal with in me, is the shame, the deep, deep shame that I carried for so many years. And I'm finding that is also, it's a symptom of my codependency, because I have other addictions, and codependency is one of them. Learning more about that, getting free from that. And so I continued with the sponsor, and I'm still with the sponsor since September of 2020. And I did have a relapse in 2022. My eating got a little bit sloppy, and I ate something with high fructose in it, which was one of my red light foods, and talked to my sponsor about it. She said, well, I think you should start again. And I really did need to, because I was starting to get sloppy with food and eating some things that I found were triggering. And so I started again. So I've been abstinent for 15 months. But in 2023, in this year, my eating has been evolving, and I have a nutritionist. I have another nutritionist that I work with. And I came to find out that I have an eating disorder, and the dynamics that I was not aware of. And when all this shame and guilt came up, my sponsor would say, it seems like you just look for ways to make yourself miserable. Your eating's okay, your weight's remaining the same. Why do you have to be miserable? Because I'd think, I should stop eating this food, and I should stop eating that food. And I'd listen to people, and they'd say they had to lay down this food, and they had to lay down that food. And I was thinking, maybe I should lay down those foods. Maybe I need to lay down those foods, but I don't want to. I don't want to lay down those foods. And then the guilt and the shame. And I had to talk about all of this cluster of crap that was going on in my mind constantly.
2 minutes.
And so this is 2 minutes to 30, right?
That's correct.
And so what I'm dealing with now is looking at that disorder, working with a nutritionist. It's called orthorexia, and it's you can look it up. But I'm finding out I was taking on other people's issues, and what I have to do now is find out what works for me. And now I have to ask God about that. So I'm finding that. But what I found freedom from in these years is I have a normal body weight. I have freedom from acid reflux. I have a bad knee that I've lost all the cartilage on one side of it. I stopped eating bread. And as a result of that, because it's a trigger food, but as the good result of that is that I have arthritis too. My symptoms have lessened. I was supposed to have knee surgery with a knee replacement in 2020. And from not eating the gluten, which is inflammatory, I didn't even know it was inflammatory. I didn't stop eating bread because of the gluten. Because it's trigger. But I stopped eating the gluten, and the arthritis has gotten better. I play pickleball 3 times a week with this knee and do not need surgery at this time after 2 years of it got better. I'm learning to live in the knowledge of the presence of God. And in the big book, it says the most important thing for us is learning to live in the consciousness of the presence of God, in the consciousness of presence of God. And I am living in that. I'm living with my limitations, my human limitations. The shame still comes up from time to time. But I have a sponsor, I have God, I have a nutritionist to talk to about that. But I'm getting closer to God in my relationship. That had to change. That had to change too, because a lot of my relationship with God had to do with the shame, and I wasn't able to get closer to God because of the shame.
That's
And,
tough.
and the feeling like I'm bad. So I'm learning to live in the knowledge of the consciousness of God, and I believe that is the most important thing in my life. Even though I struggle with my own emotional problem from time to time, I find peace as I get in touch with my higher power each day through prayer and meditation. And so with that, I will close. Thank you.